How dare you speak to me that way? Do you have any idea who I am? The question, as sharp and venomous as a shard of glass, sliced through the refined ambience of Aurelia Beverly Hills. Every head in the dining room turned in unison. The soft hum of conversation and the clinking of silver cutlery stopped abruptly. All the air seemed to have been sucked from the opulent room, leaving behind a vacuum of shocked silence. All eyes landed on a formidable blonde woman, tall and imperious, who loomed over a table where a young black woman sat with quiet grace in a simple sapphire dress. The blonde woman's finger, tipped with an aggressive crimson nail, pointed accusingly. Her voice, an instrument fine-tuned by a lifetime of unchallenged privilege, dripped with contempt. I will not be insulted by some cheap, classless nobody. Her name was Victoria Blackwood, and her hand flew through the air with vicious speed. Crack! The sound echoed off the marble and crystal like a gunshot. Some diners gasped, the sharp intake of breath stark in the silence. Others, moved by a darker instinct, pulled out their phones, the screens glowing like predatory eyes in the dim light, eager to capture the carnage. "Who is she?" someone whispered. "Probably lost or something." Nervous, misplaced laughter rippled to the gallery of onlookers, but Alara Vance didn't flinch. In that singular, violent instant, Victoria Blackwood had made the biggest mistake of her life. A mistake that would, in the next 60 seconds, trigger the complete and utter destruction of her carefully constructed world. "Did you just put your hands on my wife?" The voice, low and laced with a terrifying calm, emerged from the edge of the scene, cutting through the silence like a blade. "My wife." The late afternoon sun of October 15th, 2024, filtered through the towering windows of the Thorne Estate in Bel Air, casting a golden light across the Italian marble floors of the master bedroom. Alara Vance stood before a walk-in closet, a space so vast it felt more like a luxury boutique, a sanctuary of silks and velvet she rarely explored in its entirety. Her fingers traced the soft, unpretentious fabric of a sapphire blue dress. At 28, she possessed a beauty that didn't scream for attention, but quietly commanded it. Her warm brown skin seemed to radiate a light of its own. Her expressive dark eyes, framed by naturally long lashes, held a depth that had first captured her husband's soul 3 years ago. "This one feels right," she murmured to herself, pulling the modest knee-length dress from its hanger. The fabric was a quality cotton, well-tailored but unostentatious, exactly the kind of clothing that made her feel most like herself. From the adjoining bathroom came the sound of running water as Julian Thorne finished his shower. At 35, Julian was a man who naturally commanded attention wherever he went. At 6'2", he possessed a confident presence and a sharp intelligence in his green eyes that had built an empire worth over $2 billion. His tech company, Aegis Dynamics, had revolutionized cloud data security. But at this moment, his mind was focused entirely on the evening ahead. "Alara, my love, are you ready?" Julian's voice carried from the bathroom, warm with the slight Boston accent that emerged when he was relaxed. "Our reservation at Aurelia is at 7:30. Alara glanced at the digital clock on the nightstand. 6:45 p.m. She slipped into the navy dress, appreciating how the fabric moved naturally with her body. As she fastened the simple silver locket Julian had given her for their second anniversary, she caught a reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed caught between two worlds. The girl who grew up in a tiny apartment in Detroit and the wife of one of America's wealthiest men. Julian emerged from the bathroom, adjusting his charcoal gray suit jacket. He looked every inch a successful businessman, from his perfectly styled dark hair to his Italian leather shoes. When he saw Alara, his expression shifted slightly, love mixed with gentle concern. "You look beautiful," he said, crossing to where she stood. His hands found her waist, pulling her close. "You always do." Alara heard the unspoken, but in his tone. They'd had this conversation before, always gently, always with love, but it lingered between them like morning fog. "I know what you're thinking," she said softly, straightening his tie, even though it didn't need adjusting. "You want me to wear the Valentino dress." Julian's thumb traced along her cheek. "I want you to wear whatever makes you happy. It's just," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "Aurelia attracts a certain crowd. People judge first and ask questions later. I don't want anyone to treat you poorly because they don't understand who you are. Ilara's heart clenched. This was the eternal struggle of their marriage, his protective instincts warring with her need to remain true to herself. She understood his concern. In their world of charity galas and business dinners, appearance often mattered more than substance. But the thought of transforming herself into someone unrecognizable felt like betraying the woman he'd fallen in love with. "I'll change," she said quietly. But Julian caught her hand as she moved toward the closet. "No," his voice was firm but tender. "I fell in love with a woman who wore a $15 dress to our first coffee date and made it look like $1 million. Don't change for anyone, not even me." The memory brought a smile to both their faces. That autumn day 3 years ago, when they'd met at a small cafe in Westwood, seemed like a lifetime ago. Ilara had been working as a literacy coordinator for underprivileged children, barely scraping by on her nonprofit salary, but rich in purpose. Julian, taking a rare break from his demanding schedule, had been immediately drawn to her passionate discussion about educational inequality with the barista. "Are you sure?" Ilara asked, searching his face. "I'm sure." Julian kissed her forehead. "You're perfect exactly as you are." 20 minutes later, they were seated in Julian's midnight blue Bentley, gliding through the tree-lined streets of Beverly Hills. The autumn evening was warm for October, typical of Southern California's stubborn resistance to seasonal change. Ilara watched the elegant shops and restaurants pass by, each more exclusive than the last. "Nervous?" Julian asked, noticing her quiet demeanor. "A little," she admitted. "I always feel like I'm wearing a costume in places like this." Julian reached across the center console to take her hand. "You belong everywhere I belong. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." His words were meant to comfort, but Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would test that belief. As they pulled up to Aurelia Beverly Hills, with its understated elegance and reputation as a haven for Hollywood's elite, she took a deep breath and prepared to enter a world that still felt foreign, despite 3 years of marriage. The valet opened her door with practiced efficiency, and Ilara stepped onto the sidewalk in her comfortable flats and simple dress. Around them, other patrons were arriving in luxury vehicles, the women draped in designer gowns and glittering jewelry that caught the restaurant's warm lighting. Mrs. Thorne, the maitre d', greeted them warmly as they entered. "Your usual table is ready." The dining room buzzed with a low murmur of expensive conversations and the gentle clink of fine crystal. Ilara followed Julian to their table, aware of the subtle glances from other diners. Some looked curious, others dismissive. She'd learned to read these expressions over the years. The way people's eyes would slide over her simple appearance before focusing entirely on Julian. "Relax," Julian whispered as they settled into their seats. "You're the most beautiful woman in this room. And more importantly, you're the kindest." Before Ilara could respond, Julian's phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's the Tokyo office," he said apologetically. "The Yamamoto deal. There's been a complication. I need to take this." Ilara nodded understandingly. Even on their date nights, Julian's responsibilities as CEO sometimes intruded. "Go ahead. I'll be fine. 5 minutes, I promise." Julian stood, kissing the top of her head before stepping toward the restaurant's quieter bar area to take his call. Left alone, Ilara sipped her water and observed the elegant scene around her. The soft lighting cast everything in a warm glow, and the quiet conversations created an atmosphere of refined intimacy. She was just beginning to relax when she noticed a woman at a nearby table staring at her with undisguised hostility. The woman was perhaps 45, with professionally styled blonde hair and the kind of sharp-featured beauty that suggested extensive cosmetic enhancement. She wore a white designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and her jewelry caught the light with every disapproving gesture she made to her dinner companions. "What do you think you're looking at?" The question formed in Ilara's mind, but she quickly pushed it away. She was being paranoid. The woman was probably looking at something else entirely. But as the minutes passed and Julian's call stretched longer than expected, Ilara became increasingly aware of the woman's attention. Finally, she saw the blonde woman excuse herself from her table and begin walking directly toward her. Alara's heart rate quickened. Something in the woman's expression, a mixture of disgust and self-righteous anger, made her stomach tighten with familiar dread. She'd seen that look before growing up in Detroit, and it never led anywhere good. The woman was now standing beside Alara's table, her cold blue eyes scanning Alara from head to toe with obvious disdain. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the practiced authority of someone accustomed to getting her way. "Excuse me," she said, her tone dripping with false politeness, "but I think there's been some kind of mistake." Alara looked up at the woman standing beside her table, her heart already beginning to race with an instinct she'd hoped never to feel again. The blonde woman's presence radiated hostility like heat from asphalt on a summer day, and Alara could smell her expensive perfume mixed with something sharper, the acrid scent of prejudice and entitlement. "I'm sorry," Alara said softly, her voice steady despite the warning bells clanging in her mind. "What kind of mistake?" The woman's lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. She was tall, perhaps 5 feet 8 inches in her designer heels, with a kind of artificially perfect appearance that spoke of personal trainers, weekly salon appointments, and a surgeon's careful hand. Her white Chanel dress probably cost more than most families spent on groceries in 6 months, and the tennis bracelet on her wrist caught the restaurant's ambient lighting like captured stars. "Well," the woman said, loud enough that nearby tables began to turn their attention toward the conversation, "I couldn't help but notice you sitting here all alone, and I thought perhaps you were lost." Around them, the gentle hum of dinner conversation began to quiet as other patrons sensed drama brewing. Alara was acutely aware of the eyes turning in their direction, the way conversations paused mid-sentence as people strained to listen. The warmth she'd felt moments earlier was rapidly being replaced by a cold knot of dread in her stomach. "I'm not lost," Alara replied calmly, though her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "I'm having dinner with my husband." The woman's laugh was sharp and brittle, like breaking crystal. "Your husband?" She glanced around theatrically, making sure she had the attention of the surrounding tables. "I don't see anyone with you, dear, and frankly, I'm having trouble understanding how someone like you could afford to eat at a place like Aurelia." The words hit Alara like physical blows. "Someone like you." The phrase contained multitude of assumption and hatred wrapped in the deceptively polite language of Beverly Hills society. Alara had encountered this before. The assumption that her skin color automatically disqualified her from certain spaces, certain levels of success, certain types of respect. "My husband stepped away to take a business call," Alara said, her voice remaining level despite the fury beginning to build in her chest. "He'll be back shortly." "Oh, how convenient," the woman said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "A mysterious husband who's conveniently absent." She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a stage whisper that still carried to nearby tables. "Listen, sweetheart, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this establishment has standards. People like you don't just wander in here and sit down at premium tables." Alara felt heat flood her cheeks. The phrase, "people like you," hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. Every eye in their section of the restaurant was now focused on their exchange, and Alara could see the mixture of curiosity, discomfort, and unfortunately, agreement on some of the watching faces. "I have every right to be here," Alara said, her voice growing firmer, "just like anyone else." The woman's perfectly manicured eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Rights? Oh, honey, let me explain something to you about rights." She gestured grandly around the elegant dining room. "This isn't some chain restaurant where anyone with $20 can walk in. This is Aurelia Beverly Hills. Do you have any idea what it costs to eat here? Do you know who comes here?" Alara's hands clenched in her lap. She thought of Julian's words in the car. "You belong everywhere I belong." But sitting here now, facing this woman's venom while her husband was absent, those words felt fragile as spun glass. "I know exactly where I am," Alara said quietly, "and I know I have every right to be here. Rights don't pay for $30 appetizers," the woman snapped, her veneer politeness finally cracking completely. "And they certainly don't make you belong in places like this. Look at yourself." Her eyes raked over Alara's simple navy dress with undisguised contempt. That dress probably came from Target. Those shoes look like something from Payless. You're completely out of your league here. The cruelty in the woman's voice was breathtaking. Alara felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She would not give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "My clothes don't determine my worth," Alara said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "And they certainly don't give you the right to judge me." "Worth." The woman laughed again. The sound was like breaking bones. "Let me tell you about worth, dear. I'm Victoria Blackwood. My husband owns half the commercial real estate in Beverly Hills. We donate more to charity in a year than you probably make in a decade. I know everyone who matters in the city, and I can guarantee you that none of them would appreciate having their evening disrupted by someone who clearly doesn't understand proper social boundaries." Victoria Blackwood. The name meant nothing to Alara, but the way Victoria pronounced it suggested it should command immediate respect and deference. Around them, Alara could hear whispered conversations as other diners tried to figure out what was happening. "I'm not disrupting anyone's evening," Alara said. "I'm simply having dinner." "No," Victoria said, her voice rising slightly. "You're making everyone uncomfortable. Look around you. Do you see anyone else dressed like they're going to the grocery store? Do you see anyone else who looks like they belong here as little as you do?" The words were carefully chosen daggers, each one designed to wound. Alara felt her confidence crumbling under the assault, felt herself shrinking back into the scared little girl she'd been growing up in Detroit, the one who'd learned early that there were places she wasn't welcome simply because of the color of her skin. "I think you should leave," Victoria continued, her voice now carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having her commands obeyed. "Before you embarrass yourself any further. This isn't the kind of place where you can just walk in and pretend to be something you're not." "I'm not pretending to be anything," Alara said, but her voice was weaker now, shaken by the sustained attack on her dignity. "Oh, please," Victoria said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "We both know what this is. You saw an opportunity to sneak into a fancy restaurant, probably hoping to catch the attention of some wealthy man who might be impressed by your little charade. Well, let me save you the trouble. It's not working. Everyone here can see exactly what you are." The words hit Alara like acid. The implication that she was some kind of gold digger, someone trying to trick her way into wealth and status, was so far from the truth, it was almost absurd. But the way Victoria said it, with such conviction and authority, made Alara question everything about herself. "You don't know anything about me," Alara whispered. "I know enough," Victoria replied coldly. "I know you don't belong here. I know you're making everyone uncomfortable with your presence. And I know that the longer you sit there pretending to be something you're not, the more pathetic you look." Victoria leaned closer then, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that only Alara could hear. "Let me make this simple for you. Leave now, quietly, and maybe you can salvage what's left of your dignity. Keep sitting there, and I'll make sure everyone in this restaurant knows exactly what kind of person you really are." The threat hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Alara felt trapped, cornered by a predator who seemed to take genuine pleasure in her discomfort. Every instinct told her to stand up and walk away, to escape this nightmare before it got worse. But something deeper, something stronger, kept her seated. Maybe it was a memory of Julian's words about belonging everywhere he belonged. Maybe it was a thought of all the times she'd been forced to back down, to make herself smaller, to accept less than she deserved. Or maybe it was simply the knowledge that she had done nothing wrong, nothing to deserve this treatment. "I'm not leaving," Alara said quietly but firmly. "I have every right to be here, and I'm not going anywhere." Victoria's face flushed red with rage. The rejection of her authority, the refusal to be cowed, seemed to trigger something primal and violent in her. For a moment, Alara thought the woman might simply storm away, but instead, Victoria's voice rose to a level that ensured everyone in the restaurant could hear her next words. "How dare you speak to me that way?" Victoria shrieked. "Do you have any idea who I am? I will not be insulted by some nobody who doesn't even belong in the same zip code as this restaurant." And then Before Alara could react, before anyone could intervene, Victoria's hand flew through the air with vicious speed and connected with Alara's cheek in a slap that echoed to the now silent dining room like a gunshot. The sound seemed to freeze time itself. And in that crystalline moment of impact, Victoria Blackwood had just made the biggest mistake of her life.